Do you know, I was actually thinking about this parking situation, and I was going to write a big massive spiel about it, but then I thought, do you know what, I'll just do a wee video. I was thinking about when most of the houses around Kilbirnie and other areas were actually built. They were built in a time when cars weren't really accessible for average people. They were built in a time where cars weren't really taken into consideration when it came to the streets and whatnot, you know. And I think it's very dishonest of the council and the Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, that is, the Holyrood, to actually pass these rules when they've not actually given anybody any alternative. Here's the thing, right? You've got houses on each side of a road, right? Yeah, granted, some of those houses actually have parking spaces, right? They have driveways and whatnot. But let's say, like, take Central Avenue, for instance, right? You only have a limited amount of parking on either side of the road. So people park a little bit on the pavement, so then they can park either side and still give cars a way through. But now what's happening is, because you're having to park on the road, you can no longer get as many cars in that street. And yeah, I understand people's points of view that, yeah, they shouldn't be parking on the pavement and whatnot, but I don't actually see an issue with it as long as there's an adequate amount of space on the pavement for people to walk past. You're actually making the road more dangerous by making it a slalom, so people are parking either side of the road and you're having to slalom down the road. It's actually making it a lot more dangerous. And I actually raised this issue with a friend of mine who's actually a local councillor, right? And this is the thing that really annoys me. Whenever you raise an issue like this with somebody, they always pass the buck. They always pass the responsibility on to somebody else. They always say, oh, well, you know, the rule was passed in the houses in Holyrood, the bill was passed in Holyrood, so, you know, the councils are obligated to enforce these rules. But they're really not. Because there is councils out there, and I actually stay in one. I only come here to visit my father. Right? I only come to Kilbirnie to visit my father. I actually stay in another area, and they're not enforcing them. They're not enforcing these pavement rules because it's not feasible for people to get parked safely without actually having a little bit on the curb. Like where I'm actually from, there's houses either side, and nobody has any driveways. So you've got houses either side that were built back in probably the 40s or the 50s. This is when these houses were built. So not a lot of people had private cars back then. These houses have been built back then, and nobody's got any driveways. So you've got maybe two cars, let's say an average of 2 cars per household, right? And the road is only wide enough to fit one set of cars down one side. If you're not parking slightly on the pavement. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. It's not feasible. You know, you can't enforce a rule on the people and make them pay like fines when you haven't given them an alternative. You haven't given them like you haven't widened the road, thinned the pavement out, so as then giving those people places to park. There's a moral standpoint to this here, and I think if anybody, I know if I get a ticket, I'm not paying it. If anybody gets a ticket, ignore it. Ignore that ticket. Don't pay it, because it's just another way of the council getting money out of you. Here's the thing: SNP cut the council budgets because apparently Parliament cut their budget, right? But SNP cut the budgets to the councils, and told the councils, you have to do things to raise your own money. You have to do things to raise money by yourself. And some councils have taken it upon themselves to enforce this pavement rule, even though it's completely immoral. And there's loads of reasons why it's immoral. But some councils have chosen not to. Some councils have chosen not to enforce that particular rule. Now, I used to work as a civil enforcement officer, which is a parking warden, basically. That was down in Oxford. And now, granted, it's not Scotland, it's Oxford that I used to do this job. But I know that councils have the ability to actually ignore certain rules, certain parking rules, because down in Oxford they only enforce 37 of the 201 rules that the RTA set up for parking enforcement. Because on the actual computer that you use, there was only that amount of parking contraventions that you could actually enforce. So they actually chose which ones they wanted to enforce and ones they didn't want to enforce. And that's the way that councils work. They can determine what they want to enforce. And when I spoke to that local councillor and I voiced my opinion, pass the buck. And I was quite disappointed actually, because I believed that he probably feels the same. But politics means that he can't say it. He can't come out and openly say it and openly condemn the policy because of like having to toe some kind of invisible line. But anyway, I just wanted to discuss that slightly because I think that it's not in the best interests of the public to pay these fines. If you start paying these fines, they'll keep enforcing them. Whereas if you ignore them, they won't keep enforcing them. That's just my opinion, you know. And it's like the LEZ policies, the low emissions zone policy in Glasgow. It's not made the air any cleaner. It's not made the air any cleaner because they've still got buses and taxis and diesel trains, and the motorway runs right through the city centre. So you've got the M8 that runs right across the Kingston Bridge, right through the city centre, separating the West End from the city centre. Goes up. It takes a right-hand turn from if you're going Edinburgh bound, that is, and goes straight along the top of the city. It didn't make the air any cleaner, but they're still enforcing it and they're still making people pay fines. Do you know why they keep doing this? They keep doing this because people keep paying them. Stop paying them. I don't know how many bus line tickets I've got. You know, every time I've got a friend who's disabled, and I used to drop him off at Queen Street Station, but I wanted to drop him off on the side where the ticket office is to limit the amount of walking that he had to do. I've had loads of tickets for that. I just ignore them. I don't even pay them. You know, and they can't do anything about it. There's no criminal act here. It's only a civil act, and they can only enforce civil acts on you. Sorry, 1 second. Ranting into my phone whilst I'm walking along the street. That looks good, doesn't it? But anyway, they can only enforce civil acts upon you if somebody is out of pocket. So if you've caused something, you know, and somebody's been out of pocket, they can only enforce a civil act on you under those circumstances. And parking on the pavement a little bit to keep the road clear, to make it safer, yeah, that's not going to fly. And if they were to take you to court, say you got like, 3 or 4 tickets and they decided to take you to court, you could go up to court and you could argue the point that nobody is actually being adversely affected by the way you've parked. So why is it that you're there? You know, they can't enforce it on you. And I would actually go as far as going to jail. They can't jail you for a non-criminal offence, but I would actually let them. I would go on then, fine me. I wouldn't pay it. Don't pay it. Just ignore it. Just take that little slip off your windscreen and fling it in the bin or burn it, whatever you prefer. I would prefer to burn it, but that's just because that's the kind of person I am. I like to burn things that I don't feel are applicable in my life. I just burn them and get rid of them. But anyway, that's just my way. Yeah, so just from now on, don't pay any of that crap, because it means nothing. It's not making the roads safer. It's actually making the roads more dangerous. If you think about the way that the cars have to park now, they have to park further out in the road. It's making them more dangerous. And the argument, oh no, that it's slowing traffic, that's not the case. Because in the schemes and whatnot, yeah, you do get the odd person whizzing around in their car and all that kind of shit. But they're not going to slow down just because there's a few cars in the way. They're still going to speed. They're going to see it like a racetrack now, and they're going to slalom around those cars like it's some kind of joke, which is a joke when you think about it. That's all that's going to happen. People at the speed aren't going to slow down just because we park on the road. And they shouldn't use that as a means to slow traffic down. If they really wanted to slow traffic down, put speed bumps in. Put the speed bumps in. It works. Everybody knows it works, because when you come up to a speed bump, the last thing you want to do is damage your suspension by ramming into it. You know, if they really wanted to slow traffic down, they would use speed bumps, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to slow traffic down, they're trying to make money. They're trying to make extra money out of your pocket. I don't have to park on the street because I actually have off-street parking. But that's besides the point. I feel for the people that actually do have to park on the street, and I understand why they do it. Let me just wait there 1 second. Oh, is that better? Yeah. And I understand why they do it. There's no reason, there's no safety benefit for making you park on the road. It's actually the opposite. It makes it more dangerous. And when you look at the circumstances that we've been placed in Ayrshire by these rules, you know, there's no moral basis for them to enforce them. And don't let any of these politicians brainwash you into thinking that it's correct, because it's not. Houses weren't built back then with cars in mind, so they're just using that to make money. That's all they're doing. Baseline, that's what it comes down to, money. But anyway, rant over. Got to go and get my shopping.